The ballroom went silent the moment the pink box opened in front of 300 guests. Cockroaches spilled across her hands, across her white apron, across the marble floor. Grace didn't scream. She didn't run. She just stood there, shaking, while men in tuxedos and women in diamonds stared at her like she was the entertainment. Michael Hale, the billionaire everyone had come to celebrate, froze when he saw her face. But what happened in the next 60 seconds would end his engagement, and reveal something his fiancée never wanted anyone to know. Grace Miller had worked at the Hale estate for 6 years. She polished silver until it shined like glass. She remembered which grandchild liked warm milk before bed, and which guest was allergic to peanuts. She wasn't just staff. She was part of the walls, part of the mornings, part of the quiet rhythm of that enormous house. Her son Noah was 8 years old. Every night, Grace came home to a small apartment above a laundromat and made him grilled cheese, because it was the only meal he ever asked for twice. She kept his school photo in her apron pocket, tucked behind an old grocery receipt she never threw away. Michael Hale noticed her the way people notice things they've stopped questioning. She was simply, reliably there. He trusted her with his house keys before he trusted most people with his phone number. His late mother had hired Grace herself years earlier, and Michael always said the house had never once felt cold since she walked through its doors. But 2 months before his engagement party, Michael's fiancée, Olivia Grant, started watching Grace a little too closely. And nobody understood why. Started small. Olivia would ask Grace to redo tasks that were already finished. She'd leave notes criticizing work no one else complained about. Then, at a dinner party, Olivia introduced Grace to guests as the help, loud enough for the whole table to hear. Michael wasn't there for most of it. He was traveling, closing deals, trusting that his home was in good hands. What he didn't know was that Olivia had started reading his old text messages from months before they met, when Michael had once written that Grace was the most honest person in this house. Olivia never forgot that sentence. One afternoon, Noah came to the estate after school because his usual sitter was sick. He sat quietly in the kitchen doing homework. Olivia walked in, looked at him, and said something Grace never repeated to anyone. Noah didn't speak for the rest of that day. Grace almost quit that week. She stayed only because rent was due, and because Michael, when he finally came home, thanked her so warmly for everything she did that she convinced herself things would get better. They didn't. The engagement party was 3 weeks away, and Olivia was already planning something. The week of the party, Olivia asked Grace to personally deliver every guest gift, including one final box reserved for a very special thank you. She said it with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Grace should have felt proud. Instead, something felt wrong. The box was wrapped too carefully, sealed too tightly, and Olivia insisted Grace, and only Grace, should be the one to open it on stage in front of everyone, as a surprise. Michael's grandfather, Henry, an old man who rarely spoke at parties anymore, watched Olivia give those instructions from across the room. He said nothing. But he asked his driver to quietly follow the delivery truck that dropped off the box that morning. Nobody noticed him do it. The night of the party, string lights glowed across the estate garden. Michael stood at the microphone, thanking his staff, thanking his family, thanking Grace by name for keeping this house a home. Guests applauded. Grace smiled for the first time in weeks. Then Olivia handed her the pink box and asked her to open it right there, in front of everyone. "So Michael can see how much you mean to us." Grace lifted the lid. And the room went silent. Cockroaches poured out across her arms as gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone dropped a wine glass. A woman in a silver gown covered her mouth. Grace stood frozen, tears sliding down her face, too humiliated to move. Michael pushed through the crowd, horrified, reaching for her, asking what had happened. And that's when Henry stepped forward, holding his phone. "I have the delivery receipt," Henry said quietly. "It was ordered under Olivia's name 3 days ago, from a company that supplies feeder insects for reptile stores. The garden went completely still. Olivia laughed nervously, insisting it was a mix-up, a terrible accident. But Henry kept talking. He explained how he'd asked his driver to follow the delivery, how the driver had filmed the box being switched at the side entrance, how Olivia had personally instructed the florist to seal it before Grace ever touched it. Michael turned to Olivia, his voice breaking. "You did this to her. In front of everyone, at our own engagement party." Olivia's smile finally disappeared. She reached for his arm, whispering that she could explain, that it wasn't what it looked like. For the first time all night, she had nothing that actually made sense to say. But the story wasn't over yet, because what Michael did next surprised everyone in that garden, including Grace herself. Michael didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply removed his own jacket, walked straight to Grace, and gently placed it over her shaking shoulders, brushing a cockroach from her sleeve like it was nothing at all. "You've spent 6 years taking care of this family," he said, loud enough for every guest to hear. "Tonight we take care of you." He turned to Olivia. "The engagement is over." Then he did something no one expected. He asked the band to keep playing, asked the caterers to bring out dessert, and asked Grace, still in her apron, still trembling, to sit beside him at the head table, right next to Henry, who patted her hand like a grandfather comforting his own grandchild. Noah was brought in from the kitchen, where he'd been quietly finishing his homework, and Michael introduced him to every guest by name, telling them how proud Grace should be of her son. Guests who had gasped in horror now stood and applauded, this time for a different reason entirely. In the weeks that followed, Michael made sure Grace's title changed, her salary changed, and Noah's school tuition was quietly paid in full, not as charity, but as respect long overdue. Henry visited every Sunday, always bringing grilled cheese ingredients, insisting Noah teach him the right way to make it. Olivia was never invited back. And Grace, who once believed she was invisible in that enormous house, learned that the people who truly see you are the ones who stay when everyone else is watching. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness becomes the greatest legacy a family will ever leave behind.